Okay, welcome back to video 4 of the Tiny Room Simulator, C Sharp. So I just finished off the Bolt versions. Now we're going to do the C Sharp version. Let's just kind of see where we were last week. We're able to place an object, right click to pick it up, middle click to delete it. So we should be able to place it, rotate it. So once we drop it, we can pick it up again, rotate it again, and drop it. So everything seems to be working. So what I want to do this week is just make it a little more interesting. Like I want to have different layers for different objects so that, for example, we're going to be making a TV that has some functionality on it, but I don't want to be able to put the TV anywhere other than on a TV stand, for example, or on top of something. So we're going to create a few layers. One's going to be the object layer that we currently have. We're going to create a placeable layer. So objects we can place things on top of. And then we're going to make a layer for any object that we can interact with and do something with, have some sort of functionality. Okay, so in order for this to work, we are going to first make copies of our objects. So I'm going to go to my prefab folder. All I did differently from last week, I just created a folder for my bolt prefabs and my code prefabs. So I'm going to select my double base code. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to duplicate it. Oh jeepers, I do that every time. Just Control D. I'm going to rename this one to be, let's call it TV unit base. There we go. That's going to be my TV unit base. I'm going to double click and open it. Remember, the stuff is disabled because remember we turn the meshes on and off when we want them. So I'm going to essentially just delete all these base models because we don't need them. We're going to replace them with new ones. I'm going to go to my models folder, assets, and I'm going to look for something to do with television. I'm going to find this cabinet television. I'm going to drag this in. Again, you can always add your own assets and stuff. I'm just using mine from Kenny.nl, which is a really nice guy with a really cool site that just shares a lot of really cool stuff. So it's definitely worth going to take a look at it. So the unit is, again, 10 times too big. So I'm going to make it small. I'm going to make it like 90% smaller so that it's within a reasonable scale. I'm going to go into my top view by clicking that arrow and clicking the cube in the middle to flatten it, and then I'm just going to move my object till it is in the center of my grid. There we go. I'm going to click the little cube in the middle at the top right here so it goes back into my perspective view, and that's the one model. While I'm here, I'm going to rename this one to original. That's going to be the original mesh, and I'm going to just go to my parent and we're going to adjust the box collider. Currently the box collider is incorrectly scaled, so I just went into orthographic view so I get a flat view of the model so I don't get any perspective when I'm trying to manipulate the collider. Remember to leave a little bit of room at the bottom because we don't want the collider to give us like saying we can't place it on something, because remember we're using the collider to check for overlap, on trigger enter, on trigger stay, and on trigger exit. So we just want to make sure the collider encompasses the entire model with the exception of the little bit at the bottom over there. There we go. I think that should do it. So we're going to duplicate this original mesh, hide the original mesh, rename this one to overlapped because that's what it's going to be, the overlapped model. Remember we have an overlapped material, so I'm going to drag that straight onto the model. It's going to be the red one because red means we can't actually place the object. Again, I'm going to duplicate that model one more time. I'm going to hide the overlapped one, rename this one to be not overlapped. Again, whatever naming convention you really want to do here, I just kind of came up with what made sense at the time. So dragging my not overlapped material onto this model. Let's try that again. There we go, and I'm going to now disable all my models. And remember, before you do anything else, you have to go to the parent of the prefab and assign each of these models to the script so that it is aware that there is an overlapped model, a not overlapped model, and an original model. So let's see how this works out, see if it's working and everything. I'm going to now assign a new layer before I do that. So over here, if you look, select the object, in the top right you'll see it says object. I'm going to go and add a new layer. I'm going to show you what I created. Remember we had the floor layer, the object layer. I added two more new ones, placeable and interactable. So I've just added those two new layers. One for objects we can place stuff on, and the other one is objects we can interact with. So I just created those two. Okay, so now we go back to this object and assign the placeable, because we say no, this object only, because this is the only object that has a collider. All the children have no colliders, so it makes no difference if I were to assign that layer to those objects. So now this is an object that can be placed. Okay, so I'm going to just go and test to see how this works. It should work just like normal, so I'm going to duplicate my canvas button, rename it to TV unit. I keep saying TV Unity. My brain is very confused lately. There we go. I'm going to rename what the text says. So I'm going to say television unit. Wow, that's big. Let's just reduce the font size a little bit. There we go. If we're going to do that, we might as well resize the font on the top one to be the same size. Okay, so remember step 2 is to select the button, go down to the script, and assign the new object to the new prefab that you want to use, which is the TV unit. So let's just test if everything so far is working before we progress forward. So I'm going to go and add a bed, add a TV unit. It seems to be working. I can rotate it. Should be able to place it down now. Should be able to right click and pick it up, which I can't, and we'll talk about that now, because I can right click and pick up the bed, but I can't right click and pick up the unit. Now, to go back to what we did last week and the week before and all that, if we go to our tiny room manager, remember when we right click, we're using this object layer, and currently it's only using object. So because I created these new layers, I'm just going to make sure placeable is turned on and interactable is turned on, just so that I'll be able to pick up all of these objects regardless of what layer. As long as the layer is holding some sort of geometry, there we go, I should be able to pick that one up, drop it, pick this one up, drop it, delete it, delete it. There we go. So that is now officially working. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want the object to tell the manager what layer to look for. So, for example, a bed should only be able to go on the floor. The TV unit should only be able to go on the floor. Paintings should maybe go onto walls. Like the TV we're going to create should be able to go onto TV units, or maybe another flat surface set, but you wouldn't want to put the TV on the floor. So let's think about what we're going to do here. So I'm going to go to my scripts folder. I'm going to open up my prefab base. Apologies for all of this. Visual Studio Code. If Visual Studio Code is giving you any grief, just move over to Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code has been doing a lot of weird stuff since this update from Unity. So we have 3 variables currently. We need to add a few more because we need to add some functionality that is going to be used for your interactable objects. So we need to have a reference to some sort of UI that will allow us to turn the object on and off. In the case of the TV, to turn the TV on, turn the TV off. We're going to need some sort of reference to the buttons when they get clicked, and which we don't actually need really. And then the last one is we're going to need a reference to some sort of object that we're enabling and disabling. So I'm just going to add a few more serialized fields. Start with the first one being a game object. This one is going to be the object UI. So this is going to be referencing the object UI that it needs to enable and disable. Another serialized field. This one's also going to be a game object. And this one's going to be the object to interact with. I know, damn, that's long, but let's leave it. So this is the object I want to interact with. Okay, and then the last one, because I might want to play some sort of sound or music or something, I'm going to add another serialized field. This time it's going to be a audio source. And this one's going to be, let's just call it sound. There we go. So audio source, sound, so that it will be able to play the sound. Okay, so far so good. So we have, let me see, we have one for the UI, one for the object, and one for the sound. Okay, so we're going to leave this. We'll come back and do the code for this, but we do have the variables there now that we can use to build up one more prefab just for this test case. So I'm going to go back to my prefab folder, duplicate my TV unit or the bed, up to you. This one's just going to be called TV base. Double click on it to open it. Delete all the models again, and let's just start do this process all over again. Go to the assets folder in the models, type in television, and you'll have two types of TVs with this pack, like what they call a modern TV and a vintage TV. So let's just see what they look like. Modern TV is your standard flat screen, and your vintage TV is this kind of old-fashioned CRT type TV. So again, up to you which one you're going to use. I think for this time, because I used the vintage for the bolt, I'm going to use the modern for this case. Remember, it is 10 times too big, so I'm going to reduce the scale of my object. I'm going to right click and rename this to be original. I'm going to then tweak the collider so that it fits correctly, making sure that it fits the TV at the extents of the model. So you can see I'm not putting it to the base, I'm putting it to the side, the top of the unit. There we go, somewhere over there should be good. Again, I'm not going 100% accurate. As I tweak this I will, but right now I'm just kind of setting down the groundwork. Okay, so let's duplicate the original model. Let's call this one overlapped. We're going to assign the overlapped material. Again, I'm going to duplicate this model one more time and say not overlapped. And I'm going to assign the not overlapped material. And then I'm just going to disable these two for now, the overlapped and not overlapped, because I kind of need this one to kind of gauge what I want to do. So I'm going to put a light in here so that we can, looks like the TV is going on. We can even animate the light if we want. And we're going to play a sound. So let's start by adding a light. I'm going to right click on the base prefab, go to light, and then we're just going to add a point light. I think a point light should be more than enough. Now if you move the light around like I am and you move it forward, you'll see that it's like, but where is my light? Why is it not working? If you look at the top of your viewport over here next to 2D, you click on this little icon that looks like either a light or a hot air balloon depending on how you look at it. If you turn that on, you'll see that the light is working. So I'm going to pull the light a little bit further away, not too far away. And then I'm going to change the range. It's like currently going to emit light for 10 meters. I think my room is 4 meters, so I'm going to make it emit for make it 4 meters. There we go. I'm going to change the color. I never like to use white light, pure white light when it comes to lighting. Just makes it look, everything look a little bit sterile. So I'm going to go for this kind of maybe artificial green or blue. Let's go for green. And then I'm just going to make the intensity twice as much. And then the last thing is, if you want to have shadows, remember to look down here and it says no shadows. We can make it hard shadows or soft shadows, up to you. Hard or soft is based on whether or not you want the edge of the shadow to be a little bit like hard, like as if you were using a pen, or you could blur it out a little bit, almost like an airbrush kind of effect. So you just decide what you want to do with it. There we go. I think that. And essentially the idea is that when we turn this light on and off, it almost looks like the TV is being illuminated. We could go even as far as making a little video that plays on there, but for now we're just going to be turning the TV on and off. So I'm going to leave that light off. I'm going to rename the light to TV light. And then that's all that's left to do for this is add a little UI and add the audio. So the audio we're going to add to the TV base. We're going to add a component called audio source. I'm just going to move the audio source above my script. So I'm going to right click on it and say move up. I'm going to open this up just to show you. So we need some sort of audio that we're going to put in here that we're going to play. So I've downloaded an audio called, it's like this kind of static sound. So if we listen to it now. Put the volume of my desktop up a little bit so you can hear it again. Just we go. So that's the sound. I'm going to add that to my, where it says audio clip. Output, do not worry about that. We are not even there yet as far as using audio mixer groups, so don't worry about that. We have a lot of options here. We can mute, bypass effects, bypass the listener effect, bypass reverb zones. We can do a lot of bypass. The one I want to turn off is where it says play on awake. I don't want the sound to play when the object is in the world. I want to turn it on and off myself. So that's where we want loop to be on, so when the sound plays, it's going to loop round and round. It's going to repeat over and over and over. Okay, we've got a few other things. We have the priority of the audio in relation to other audio. We have the volume, which is between 0 and 1. We have the pitch. We have the stereo pan, so whether it should be going to the left side of your headset, right side of your headset. And we're not going to cover spatial blending or reverb zone mix because we're not doing that yet. So we're just going to cover volume, and you can play with your pitch and your stereo pan if you want. But right now I'm going to say that I'm going to put my audio to be 25% of the original sound. I think it's going to be quite loud, so let's just leave it at that. Okay, so I'm going to drag my audio source into where it says sound while I'm at it. I'm also going to add my original mesh, my overlapped mesh, my not overlapped mesh, and the object to interact with, that's the lights. I'm going to grab that and put it there. So all that's left to fill up is our object UI. So let's right click and create a new button. You'll see it automatically creates a canvas that goes with this button. And what I want to do before we forget is I want to rename this canvas to object UI canvas. And I want to change the way it scales. Currently it's constant pixel size, which means that if I were to show you now, you won't actually see it, sorry, is that if I make this bigger or smaller, this button will not scale up with your screen size. It will just stay constant. So if you go onto a smaller device, you might end up cutting your buttons off. So for safety's sake, go to your canvas on the right side where it says canvas scaler. Make sure the UI scale mode is set to scale with screen size. And then we'll be able to, this button will now, this UI will scale with the size of your screen. I'm just going to put this down here for now, somewhere here. Let's just go 2D. Okay, so that's button 1. We're going to rename this to button dash, let's call this interact, because we're going to be interacting with this button. I'm going to change that to say on, because currently the TV is off. Also just going to scale that up a little bit and change it to maybe bold. There we go. I'm going to offset it to the one side. Maybe make it -100 in the X. And then I'm just going to duplicate this button one more time and just call this one exit, because when we want to exit the interaction with the object, I'm going to make this 100 in the X to be exactly -100 and 100 from the center of the screen. And then I'm going to just change this text to say exit. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so again, I'm going to disable this because we don't want it on at the start. I'm going to go to my TV base and add my object UI to where we're missing our object UI. And now we have the prefab set up as it is. So the idea is that when we have this UI, let me turn it on. When I click on, the light on the TV, this light's going to go on. And when I click on that button again, it's going to go off, on, off, on, off. And when I click the exit, it's just essentially going to close the UI. So that's all we really want to do. And it's quite a nice set of functionality, also very basic. You can add as much as you want. So let's get this actually going. So let's start by making sure that the object is on the correct layer. We created an interactable layer, so I'm going to make sure that my object is on the interactable layer. And we're going to go and just create a button for this. So duplicate the TV button. I'm just going to remove TV unit and just have straight up TV. I'm going to move it down. Rename this to say television as opposed to TV unit. There we go. And we're going to change the object we want to instantiate down here from TV unit to TV base. And let's just test if up to this point everything we've done is working and not breaking. There we go. There we go. There we go. And because remember when I added this to the right click, I'm able to pick up all of these objects. So I can delete all of these objects, rotate these objects, there we go, and place them again. So now the problem is I basically only want to place this on top of a TV unit and not on the floor. I guess you could choose what you want to do and how you want to do it. So we need to add one more piece of code to this to the prefab base. So let's open that up. So underneath all of this, we're going to add another serialized field. This one's going to be a layer mask, and this one's going to be, let's just call it straight up. Call it raycast layer. So what layer are we raycasting for this specific object? Whoops. Okay, so that's the name of the layer, called raycast layer. So what we want to do is say when the object gets selected, actually over here, when object is picked up. So when object is picked up, we're going to want to say that tiny room manager dot instance dot, and we had a layer there, remember, which was called layer. Come on, I believe in you. Just see, because like I said, my Visual Studio Code is freaking out. Yeah, there it is. It's called layer. I might have to change over to Visual Studio Code, so be patient with me. Is equal to, this one is called raycast layer. So we're saying that when I pick up this object, please tell the manager, this is the raycast layer, the layer that this object can only be on this layer, and then we update the manager and inform the manager of that. Okay, we're going to do the same thing when we instantiate this object into the world. So when we say awake, so when this object is awake, do the exact same thing, because that means we're currently holding the object. Okay, that should do it. And we have the layer set up over here. We have the raycast layer. We can test this out. We simply just go to our prefabs, to each of our prefabs. We say, okay, cool, the bed is going to be looking for the floor. The TV base is going to be looking for the floor. And in the TV, sorry. The TV is not looking for the floor. It's going to be looking for a placeable object. And then the TV unit is going to be looking for the floor. Do not concern yourself with the empties on the ones that don't have any functionality. Like the TV is the only one that's got all of this functionality, all the objects filled. These do not need it because they're not going to behave the same way. But it's just there at the base, so we don't have to duplicate scripts and all that nonsense. We just use it as it is. Okay. Now if we go to our tiny room manager, I've made sure that the layer is visible so I can see what layer should be used. Let's just see what happens when I click on the bed. It should be floor by default. When I click on television, notice how it is placeable. So there's nothing placeable. This object cannot be placed. So I'm just going to middle click to delete the object. But we know it works. So if I go television unit, it works. If I go for TV, notice how it works on top over here, but it stops working the moment I stop. But also notice you can go down the side of the TV, but because of the overlap, we can't actually place it. But we can go in and just refine this to look for surfaces that are vertical, and you should only be able to place it on there. So we can now place that down. So that's working. So our little layer system is working. Now all I want to do is say, when I right click on this, when I left click on this object, I want to be able to pop up that little menu we designed in the object, turn the TV on, turn the TV off, exit, and continue with what we're doing. So let's do that, shall we? So that's going to happen inside of the tiny room manager. And when we left click, which means if placing is false. So first we want to make sure that placing is false. So if placing is false, and we're doing the left mouse button, the right mouse button. So we're looking for if placing is false, which it's not. So we're going to add a new one here. We're going to say if, choose the second option, if placing, and remember, false, you can just put an exclamation mark in the front. So if is placing is false, and we're going to do the following. We're going to copy this raycast. We're going to copy that entire line. Actually, we could have just copied that in. Yeah, let's just copy this entire line here. Control C, go in here, go Control V. We're going to change where it says 1 to 0, and the object, the layer we're going to be looking for is the object layer, because that is the layer we're looking for, the objects that we have. And if that is true, we're going to speak to the object. So we're going to say, by the way, boom, please do something. So we don't have that just yet. So over here, we're going to say interact with object UI. So we're going to just turn the object UI on. So let's just say turn on object UI. So that's what's going to happen in here. So if this is false and all of this comes back as true, we're going to interact with the object that we hit with here. Okay, but which means we just want to basically say that we want to copy this line here. Currently selected is, we want to copy that because we're going to need that. We're going to first need to get the object, the game object that's assigned to the collider from the raycast hit, so that we can tell it that this is now the currently selected object. Okay, so we need to go to our prefab, and then over here we just need to add 3 functions. One to turn on the UI, the one to turn off the UI, and the third one is to actually do the turning the lights on and all of that. So we're going to go at the bottom here, we're going to go public void, and we're going to say enable UI, and over here all we're going to do is say object UI dot set active to true. That's all we're doing. We just basically, what we're doing here is, if I go back to Unity, all we're saying is, if we go to the prefab where this is actually going to be happening, if I open up my TV, all I'm saying is turn this to be true. So all I'm doing is turning this game object on and off. That's it. And then all we're going to do is just literally duplicate this. So copy, Control V, and just call this one disable UI, and this one's going to be false as opposed to true. So all we're doing is telling it to no longer, wow, spell false properly, shall we? And that's going to be enabling and disabling. So that's really simple. We could put this into one function if we really, really wanted to. But we're just going to keep it separate for the time being, but we can have it as a single function. Okay, the last one is going to be our public void, and we're going to be, this one is going to be interact with object, 2 round brackets, 2 curly braces. And what are we going to do in here? We're going to turn the object that we're interacting with on, dot set active to true, and we're going to play the sound. So we're going to go sound dot play. That is an audio source, correct? Yes. Again, I'm having so many issues. Play, it should be something along these lines. So we're going to play the sound here. And now the thing is, I want to double check whether this object is already on. So we need to add an if statement before this. So if, and then we'll do this. Boom, boom. Like that. And what are we checking? We're going to see if this object dot, I'm going to start typing in active. No. I think it's called self. Oh gosh, sorry. My predictive text is not actually working. You just actually go see what it was called in bold, so I can type it out and search for it. No, it's in the prefab. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to switch over now because I'm gonna be moving over to Visual Studio Code. So I'm gonna go to Preferences, External Editors, and change it to Visual Studio 2019. As much as I like Visual Studio Code, it has been extremely buggy of late. It's not really their fault. I think it's a combination of Unity and Microsoft not speaking to one another, probably. Sorry. I'm gonna move the code over here. So we'll be able to see the same code. Shortcuts aren't as nice, but it does what it does. So let's go and type in active, and you're looking for active self. So what that means is find the object, see if the objective is active. If the object is active, then do the following. In this case, if the object is active, I want this to be false, and I want this to be stop. And then if it's not, we're going to type in else. We're going to just do the opposite. So we're going to go object with dot set active to true, and we're going to type in sound dot play. There we go. So that's what we're going to be doing. Let me right click and see if I can format this document from here. Nope. Edit, advanced, format document. Control K, Control D. Okay, that's overkill. So all we've done here is we're enabling the UI here, disabling the UI there, and over here we're turning the object's light on, off, and stopping the sound. Over here we're doing the opposite. We're turning the object on and we're playing the sound. This is going to be called from the button. All we're going to do is speak to enable UI from the manager, but in order for that to work, we need to go and make this a public static. Remember to call the name of the actual prefab we have, the script, which is up here, has to be the same name that's here, and then we're just going to call this instance. You can call it copy, you can do it whatever you want with that. We're basically just making a reference to the script if it exists in the world, but we have to do that over here. So at the awake, we're going to say instance is equal to this script. If this script exists, then okay, so let's see if this Control K, Control D. Okay, so now we've made a reference to the script, which means I should be able to go into my Tiny Room Manager and say, if all of this is working, then all I want to do, actually we didn't even have to do it that way. We didn't even have to make the scripts. What am I doing? We didn't even need to. So let's go back here and let's remove this, and I'll show you why. Because we don't actually need to. We're going to be speaking directly to this object. So the Tiny Room Manager, we're going to say currently selected object dot enable let's do this get component. It's called prefab base dot enable UI. So what we're doing there is we're calling the script directly. We're saying so we're saying grab the currently selected object, get the component, which is the script prefab base, and tell it to enable its UI. So that happens when I left click on an object and placing is false. Let's see if this works. So we're going to go back to Unity. Oh yes, one more thing. This is going to do some weird stuff, so bear with me. But I think we need to see it in order to understand it. So let's add a TV unit. Let's add a television. And notice how the TV's on, so I can turn it. These don't work yet. They don't. These buttons should. So I should be able to pick up this object. Another thing that would be nice is if I pick up the object that this TV has been placed on, the TV should follow. So let's just set some of this stuff up. So everything is working, we just now need to get the buttons actually working. We're also getting an error here because we're not actually, let's reload. Because what we're doing here is we're not actually checking for the correct, how do I say this? We are raycasting for all three layers specifically, so we're not actually checking to see if it is a layer that is interactable. So we should not be telling it to look for every bloody layer, just look for a specific layer. So we're going to, at the top here, we're just going to, while we're adding more layer masks, I'm going to make this one also a serialized field. This one's going to be a layer mask, and this one's going to be interact layer. Okay, so this is going to be an interact layer. I'm going to copy the interact layer, we're going to paste it over here. So we're just going to be using, this should only work on objects that that are interactable. We should be able to interact with those objects. If not, pretty much just ignore it. Okay, so let's end this. Let's go back to Unity and suss it up one more time. The Tiny Room Manager is now going to have a new slot, which is going to be nothing. So this is going to be for objects we should be able to interact with. So we have our object layer that we're going to right click to be able to pick up objects, which is using object, place, and interact. This one is going to be looking for the floor, which we actually update. We can actually set that to nothing because that's dynamic, and interactable is going to be the one that we're going to be looking for when we're actually interacting with an object, which is going to turn the buttons on and off. So all that's left to do is go to our actual prefab of our TV, go to each of these buttons. So interact button, we're going to go down to where it says on click. We're going to add the object that has the script to the, just underneath where it says runtime only. Click on where it says no function, go to the prefab base, and we're going to look for interact with object, because that's the one that we want to turn the light on and off. The exit one is pretty simple. We're going to do the on click again, drag the script, and this time we're going to choose disable UI. Okay, so let's test that out, see if that's working. Okay, so we're going to add a TV unit, add a television, turn that on. So if you can hear that sound, it's working. I can exit and leave the TV running the whole damn time if I want. Sounds a little, no, sound doesn't loop as tightly as much as that. So next time I go on to find one of these three sound signs, I need to find a sound that makes sense. So I can just click on the object, turn it off, and it's fine. Next step is just to be able to move the TV unit around, and then the TV itself will follow that. So we're going to keep that really simple. We're going to basically start by basically parenting everything. So we're going to go into our script again, the Tiny Room Manager, and we're going to say that when we actually place the object, so if, where are we? Input, there we go. If placing is true and overlapping is false, we're going to place this here, but we're also going to just set the current object to be parented to the hit object. So we're going to say, okay, cool, get component, when object is dropped, so we're going to go and say current object dot transform dot set parent. That's not set parent. Hold on. What is the current object? Is it it's a game object. Currently selected object. That's right. So let's try that again. transform dot set parent. There it is. Jeepers, finally. And we're going to add round brackets because we want to set the parent in here. And the parent is going to be the hit object dot collider dot transform. Semicolon at the end. Now we're probably going to get an error because this variable does not exist. It's not assigned. So what I want to do in that case is, where's my raycast? No, it's right there. Right there. It's above all of them. That should work. Okay, so just to get rid of these errors, I'm going to create this raycast hit at the top here. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go make this a private variable. Let's call this raycast hit, and let's just call this hit. And then we're just going to use it from over here. So there's no weird issues. We did this originally because we're just keeping it in here, but it's going to be better if we actually have a reference to the raycast hit throughout the script. So all we've done here is say, the currently selected object, please set the parent to be the transform of the collider. Or we can even go game object dot transform just to be safe. Okay, so we can test that one more time. Okay, notice how when I add the bed to the room, if you open up the isometric room and the floor, you'll see that the bed is now parented to that, which means when I click the TV Unity, I love that, I have to fix that, it gets added to the room. If I add the television, it gets added to the floor unit. So let me turn that on, exit, let me pick up the base, notice how the TV follows respect to the rotation, and I'll drop it like this. So I can now move the object with all its children on top of it along with it. Turn that off. Now, what would be ideal is you want to make this a little bit fancier. You probably want to either design these buttons, which we'll do in the next video, or have these buttons above the object that you're turning on or off, instead of just being flat along with everything else. Add a little bit of dimension or volume to your design of your game. So we're going to turn that on. Using real-time shadows. Select everything. It should be able to select and delete everything. So I delete the child, I delete the parent, I delete the child. So that's it really. I think we covered everything. So we've added different buttons with different layers. So we can add the bed to the floor, the TV Unity. Let's just fix that. It's going to bugger the crap out of me. There we go. TV unit will be placed on the floor, and then the TV unit, TV itself can be placed on placeable objects. So you can do this with stuff like pillows will need to be on the bed. So you could expand your layer structure so that it can be very specific, that it's looking for pillows on a bed, paintings on a wall, that kind of thing. So you want to consider how you go about that. So you want to consider that you're doing that the right way, and that each of these objects have their own different layers. And the next step is just to go through lighting and UI, and then just let you go forth and make this thing as pretty as you want. You can animate the object scale as it comes in. You could make them animate the alpha on the material so that it fades in and out. There's so many things you can do to just take something as simple as this little room simulator and turn it into a lot more than that. So thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully it's been helpful. If not, just drop me a message and I'll help you where I can. But let's just go one more time through all the functionality we have. We can add an object, and while the object is selected, we can delete it. We can add another object. We can rotate it. We can drop it. We can also pick the object up again, reposition the object where we would really like it to be, like over there. We can add another object in. The overlapping events work, so you can't place an object if it's overlapping something else. I'm going to pick this object up because I just randomly placed it. There we go. I can add the TV. I'm going to place it over here in front of the window, and then as you can see, we have the functionality to turn it on and off or just exit. Let's just go back and turn it on later. That's really easy. And select every object in the scene, move it around. it, and it works. So we can just remove anything at any point. There's no, before we had the issue where it was locked down and we couldn't move it around. Now we should be able to select everything in the level, move it around as we please, and place it where we want to. So that's it. Thank you so much. I will see you at the next video where we're going to cover lighting and UI, how to add your own images, potentially animate these buttons in, how we're going to control the amount of buttons we're going to have on screen, that kind of stuff we need to cover in the next video. So till then, be safe and good luck. Cheers.